Yes, it's 5 o'clock, so we can start our proceedings. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Good evening to everybody present over here. This is Ajay Kumar Gupta welcomes you all in this 26th session of Graduate Scholar Talk series, which is an all-new initiative by Department of History, Sakshi, and IQAC, that is Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Shyamlal College Evening. This talk series has been started on 16 Feb 2021, and since then it had been carried out with diverse not only to promote speaking and presenting skills, but also to promote order thinking skills among the students.
Ajay, kindly switch off your camera. Ajay, kindly switch off your camera and start proceedings again.
Okay.
Switch off your camera. I think so.
I'm audible. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you're audible. Yeah. Yeah.
Good evening to everyone once again. This is Ajay Kumar welcomes you all in this 26th session of Graduate Scholar Talk series, which is an all initiative by Department of History, Sakshi, and IQAC, that is Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Shyamlal College Evening. This talk series has been started on 7th February 2021. Since then, it had been carried out with due perseverance and diligence weekly, every Sunday, with a view not only to promote speaking and presenting skills, but also to enhance high-order thinking skills among the students. And I personally, and we as a team, are really proud and as well as happy to announce that Graduate Scholar Talk series has successfully completed its 25 weeks, and we are celebrating our 26th week of Graduate Scholar Talk series. And believe me, guys, I'm from the bottom of my heart, I'm saying that it could have not been possible without you and your support. We have got such a good audience, such a budding listeners that they come every Sunday on 5 p.m. and they listen to us. Thank you for this genuine support from our whole team. It looks a very minute, but believe me and ask to our team, it is a great milestone that we have reached. Thank you for your presence. We are literally thankful towards our audience. So now, before directly diving into our main event, let us take the blessings of Goddess of Knowledge, Knowing and Intellect, Ma Saraswati.
श्लोक अर्थ। जो विद्या की देवी भगवती सरस्वती कुंद के फूल के समान, चंद्रमा, हिमराशि और मोती के हार की तरह धवल वर्ण की हैं, और जो श्वेत वस्त्र धारण करती हैं, जिनके हाथ में वीणा वर्ण दंड शोभायमान है, जिन्होंने श्वेत कमलों पर आसन ग्रहण किया है, तथा ब्रह्मा, विष्णु एवं शंकर आदि देवताओं द्वारा जो सदा पूजित है, वही संपूर्ण जड़ता और अज्ञान को दूर कर देने वाली माँ सरस्वती हमारी रक्षा करे।
Thank you, Ms. Preeti. And now my watch is tickling, and it is the correct time to call our chief invitee of the day, Dr. Praveen Kumar, who is an associate professor in Department of Political Science, Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. He has almost 20 years of teaching experience. He has done MA, MPhil, PhD from University of Delhi itself. He published 3 books, 12 research papers.
I think Ajay is not here.
Yes, sir.
Somehow.
So there might be some internet issue in Ajay's side. So I would be continue all this thing. So this is a time to invite our today's guest, Dr. Praveen Kumar sir, who is the Associate Professor in Department of Political Science from Sahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi. He has almost 20 years of teaching experience. He has done MA, MPhil, PhD from University of Delhi itself. He also published 3 books, 12 research papers in international and national journals, also presented 12 papers in seminars and conferences. Also, he has international relationship, diplomacy, and dialogue are the areas where he has defined the proficiency. So, sir, I would request you to come and encourage with your words. Sir, your stage, sir.
First of all, a big thanks to this very creative and dynamic team under the mentor of Professor Manish Kumar. See, I congratulate you from the core of my heart. A big congratulations for such an innovative, enterprising, and informative initiative. See, this platform, what I find unique about this platform and your effort is, it not only channelizes the potential of a student in the right direction, but by this you realize the core idea of education. You see, the basic purpose of education is development of personality, and we all live in what you call the redefined Darwinian era, the market era, where the norm is perform or perish. Now this platform, in a real sense, empower a student and enable him or her to tackle on all the challenges that come across in this journey called life. And it is such a wonderful initiative, because through this you are not only focusing on the academic component, but by this you are contributing to the holistic development of the personality, which is what is desired, what is required. It is fundamental to not only to survive but to excel in this era of LPG. So I find it a unique combination of technology, unique combination of talent, unique combination of initiative, and that's why you have completed, if I correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the 26th episode. So that in itself explains the credibility, the creativity, and the huge success of this program. And I'm so much overwhelmed and I'm so much encouraged. I've learned a lot from you, and definitely I'm going to start the initiative in my college also. And you people have been a torch bearer in this arena. And I wish you all the best, all the very best, and continue guiding us, continue guiding the academic fraternity, and keep on breaking new path, innovating new ideas, so that you can be not only a source of inspiration and motivation for all of us, but in real sense you are contributing to the enrichment of not only knowledge but also empowerment of student as well as society. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for your encouraging words. Now this is the time to welcome our today's speaker, who is Miss Amrutha Ravishankar of Lady Sri Ram College, University of Delhi. She will be speaking on the topic electoral democracy in India, burning issues and its reforms. So, Miss Amrutha Ravishankar, now over to you.
A warm good evening to all. Today I'm really delighted to have such a wonderful opportunity to express some of my perspectives regarding the broad topic electoral democracy in India, burning issues and some reforms. India is the largest democratic and republic country in the world. In any democratic and republic country, elections are necessary and also a part to democracy. In a democracy, people have the privilege of being ruled by a government of their own choice. It is through the system of elections people choose their representatives in a democracy. But the most important thing is that elections should be held freely, fairly, transparently, and impartially. For this purpose, the Indian Constitution provides an election commission with autonomous powers ranging from Article 324 to Article 329, which consist of a chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. At present, there are 2 other election commissioners. Election Commission is amongst the few institutions which function with both autonomy and freedom. The commission was established in 1950 and originally only had a chief election commissioner. 2 additional commissioners were appointed to the commission for the first time on 16 October 1989. The Election Commissioner Amendment Act of 1989, which was adopted on 1st January 1990, turned the commission into a multi-member body. Another important aspect of the independence of Election Commission must be discussed here. The Constitution envisages the setting up of an independent autonomous election commission in order to secure independence of action. Chief Election Commissioner shall not be removed from his office except in the like manner and on like ground as a Supreme Court judge. That the conditions of services of the Chief Election Commissioner shall not be varied to his disadvantage after his appointment. The CEO is therefore protected against political and executive influence, and for that reason, he can discharge his functions independently. Let us have a look at the important functions of the Election Commission provided by Indian Constitution. The superintendence, direction and control of the preparation of electoral rolls for all elections to Parliament, state legislature, offices of President and Vice President comes under the jurisdiction of Election Commission. And also he or the institution of Election Commission can advise the President or the Governor of a state on the question of disqualification of any member of Parliament. But this is subjected to 2 limitations. When Parliament or any state legislature has made a valid law in connection with elections, the Commission shall act in conformity with such law. On the same way, the Commission, while exercising power, shall conform to the rule of law and to the norms of social justice. Electoral democracy is all about universal adult franchise and general electoral roll for every territorial constituency for election to either House of Parliament or to the House or either House of the legislature of a state, which is provided under Article 325. On the same way, Article 326 incorporates the system of adult suffrage for Lok Sabha elections and Legislative Assembly of every state. There are some conditions that has to be fulfilled by an Indian citizen in order to participate in elections under the Representation of People Act of 1950. He must be an Indian citizen, must not be declared to be of unsound mind by competent court. Also, he must not be disqualified from voting under a law relating to corrupt or illegal practices. Now I am entering into the dilemma, or I am entering into the most controversial aspect of the topic which I am going to discuss today, that is the evolution of the burning issues and reforms in connection with Election Commission. India's political culture has been vitiated by unprecedented waves of populism, jingoism, sectarianism, and confrontational politics. When the Constituent Assembly envisaged an independent election commission to organize and implement the wider electoral framework upon which the democratic state was built, there was no clear-cut idea on how to entrench this independence. Initial debates were centered around how such a body would be integrated into the federal system, or whether separate institutions has to be organized in each state. But in accordance with much of the rest of the constitutional structure, the chairman of the drafting committee, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, favored a centralized body, although at a distance from the government. It was unanimously resolved by the members of the Fundamental Rights Committee too, that the greatest safeguard for purity of election, fairness in election, was to take away the matter from the hands of the executive authority and to hand over it to some independent authority. This is in line with Ambedkar's concern that decentralization would threaten minority rights. In 1972, the Joint Parliamentary Committee on Reform of Electoral Law suggested that Chief Election Commissioner should be supported by the appointment of other election commissioners. The Thakundi Committee on Electoral Reforms in 1975 also proposed that the selection of commissioners, rather than being in the hands of a committee consisting of Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition in the Lok Sabha, and Chief Justice. A similar proposal was made by all-party Goswami Committee on Election Reforms in 1990. However, the Chief Election Commissioner Peri Shastri thought the issue worthy of consideration in the late 1980s, but was not prepared for the sudden nomination of 2 extra commissioners instigated by the Rajiv Gandhi government in October 1989. This was seen as an attempt to undermine the independence of Election Commission. Another issue is of partisan influence over appointment, which emerged in a blaze of controversy in January 2009 when the soon to be retired Chief Election Commissioner Gopalaswamy wrote a letter to the President recommending the removal of Election Commissioner Naveen Chawla, who was in line to replace Gopalaswamy as Chief Election Commissioner. Gopalaswamy accused Chawla of partisanship, but the then President Pratibha Patil declined to act on the recommendation. These controversies are highlighting 2 institutional weaknesses in the structure of the Election Commission. The potential for partisan appointments by a government constitutes one part, and the difference in security of tenure for the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners occupies the other part. At the inception of the Election Commission, it was supported by a remarkably meager administrative staff. At the time of the formation of the Election Commission, it was recognized that the temporary nature of this attachment could lead to a conflict of interest amongst these staff. But Ambedkar always held the view that it would be administratively complex and wasteful to set up an elaborate machinery on a permanent basis. For much of the 1990s, Election Commission embarked on a quixotic campaign to solve the problems of voter registration, personation, electoral corruption through the technocratic and expensive provision of voter identity card, which was a personal crusade mounted by the then Chief Election Commissioner T.N. Sheshan. Another central function of the Election Commission has been the running of the polling process and vote counting. This involved huge logistical and administrative operation. Even the production and issuing of ballot papers and counting of vote has generally been carried out efficiently, and it helped to maintain the legitimacy of the electoral process. One attempt by the Election Commission to simplify and speed up the casting and counting of vote has been through the introduction of electronic voting machines, which was carried out initially in 1982. Later, it was disallowed by Supreme Court in 1984 on the grounds that the Representation of People Act included the words, votes shall be given by ballots. But later, an amendment to the Representation of People Act enabled the Election Commission to reintroduce EVMs, and these were used again in November 1998 and for the complete voting in the Goa Vidhan Sabha elections of 1999. Election Commission also plays an important role in the delimitation process by which constituency boundaries are drawn up and states are allocated seats in the national parliament. But even though most of the resources and expertise for this delimitation exercise is provided by Election Commission is kept at a legal remove from control over the process, which is vested in Parliament. Both the underlying principles coming here and the practical measures have been the subject of much debate and reform since independence, although there has been a hiatus since 1978. Another issue of electoral finance continued to be a major part in the perception of the role of the Election Commission. Black money, influence of money politics, and muscle power dominated political campaigns. Even though company donations to political parties were banned in 1969, it overturned this as there was full disclosure. The Election Commission's broad constitutional remit over the conduct of elections has been operationalized through a number of directives negotiated with the political parties. A model code of conduct for parties and candidates contesting elections was first used in Kerala prior to the assembly elections of February 1960 and circulated nationally in 1968. Model Code of Conduct provided general rules for electoral conduct, setting norms regarding the notification and conduct of public meetings, standards of decency and decorum in political debate, and condemning campaigning based on appeals to violence or communal hostility. An attempt to give such a code a legislative basis was made following the Goswami Committee report when it was included in the Representation of the People Amendment Bill of 1990. In 1997, Election Commission began a campaign against the criminalization of politics, arguing that no candidate should be allowed to contest an election if they had been convicted of an offense. Then Commissioner G.V.G. Krishnamurthy noted that no lawbreaker should ever be a lawmaker. But even though we are saying that criminalization of politics is an issue of great concern, it should be noted that there are still no authentic records about how many MLAs or MPs at present or in the recent past were criminals. Now I am entering into the new domain of electoral bonds, which is still burning the electoral domain. Announced in the 2017 Union Budget by the then Finance Minister, electoral bonds are interest-free bearer instruments used to donate money anonymously to political parties. A bearer instrument does not carry any information about the buyer or payee and the holder of the instrument. At the time of its announcement in Finance Minister Arun Jaitley's budget speech in 2017, electoral bonds were understood as a way for companies to make anonymous donations. But later, it came to reveal that even individuals, groups of individuals, NGOs, religious and other trusts are permitted to donate via electoral bond. Again, the Election Commission, in its submission to the Standing Committee on Personal Public Grievances, Law and Justice in May 2017, had objected to the amendments in the Representation of the People Act, which exempt political parties from disclosing donations received through electoral bond. It described the move as a retrograde step. Now coming to the Prime Minister of India's address on the concluding session of the 80 All India Presiding Officers Conference via video conference at Kevadia, Gujarat on the occasion of Constitution Day 26 November 2020. He raised the pitch for one nation, one election, a single voter list for all polls, and also asked the presiding officers to simplify the language of statute books and allow for an easier process to weed out redundant laws. Yes, one nation and one election is a very authentic or very burning issue to be discussed. The idea is about structuring the Indian election cycle in a manner so that elections to the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies are synchronized together. There are certain advantages. It will help keep a check on the poll expenses, party expenses, save public money, reduce the burden on administrative setup and security forces, ensure timely implementation of the government policies, and also ensure that the administrative machinery is engaged in developmental activities rather than electionary. But there are huge challenges also. Synchronization of the elections all over India is a major problem considering the traditions and conventions that India's parliamentary system follows. And also the government is accountable to the lower house, and it is possible that the government can fall before completing its term, and the moment the government falls, there has to be an election. It is difficult to convince and bring together all the political parties on the idea. But we can hold simultaneous election, the requirements of, with the novel application of technology, but even though there will be enormous stress on electronic voting machines and voter verified paper audit trials. But the syncing of the state legislative assemblies with that of the Lok Sabha, it can be brought if the common electoral roll will save an enormous amount of effort and expenditure, as the preparation of a separate voters list poses duplication of the effort and expenditure. But pursuing the state governments to tweak their respective laws and adopt the Election Commission of India voters list for municipal and panchayat polls requires a massive consensus building exercise. It can be made into effect if we are ready to do it. Then another striking evidence of the burning sensation in electoral politics is that of the recent participation level of women in formal politics in India. It revealed two positives that augur well. One is the upsurge among women voters that started in 1990s, reached the highest female turnout ever in the 2014 Lok Sabha election. Second is that of women's participation in high voltage election campaigns. However, the continued underrepresentation of women in legislative bodies and within the rank and file of political parties offsets the momentous gains made in the people-driven feminization of electoral politics in India. It still shows that there have never been concerted efforts by political parties to mobilize female voters on any issue concerning women in either national or state level elections. India's failure to pass the Women's Reservation Bill is presented as the most telling testimony about lack of seriousness among political parties in taking better account of women's increasing electoral participation. Money, power, and freebies like that of illegitimate electioneering costs, party running costs, TV airtime costs, etc. constitutes another major dilemma for the electoral process. Vote buying, freebies, which is something provided or given free of charge in terms of influencing the electorate. These are some bad stigmas which were conventional in nature, still continuing to contemporary conditions. Paid news in any news or analysis appearing in any media, either print or electronic, for a price in cash or kind, it disrupts the level playing field and circumvents the election expenditure limits. This creates a hurdle for the Election Commission of India to conduct the smooth run of elections in a free, fair, and transparent manner. Criminalization of politics is also one important anti-social element which I had discussed before, showing the existing strong nexus between the criminals and some politicians abusing the loopholes in the present system. Caste-based politics in the last 3 decades have been marked by the desire for power on the caste lines rather than a substantial agenda for social reform of the downtrodden. So now I'm entering to the arena of optimism. What are the measures undertaken under the domain of legislative measures? There has been a limit on spending of candidate. Under 90 of the Conduct of Election Rules 1961, a candidate contesting Lok Sabha polls can spend up to 70 lakh and in an assembly election up to 28 lakhs. Another thing is, in 2003, a law was passed by the parliament after the Tehelka scam. According to it, donations to political parties will receive 100% income tax exemptions for donors. Election Commission of India itself had taken major, tremendous measures like political parties registration tracking management system to allow an applicant to track the progress of his or her application. Likewise, awareness programs conducted under the name of Systematic Voters Education and Electoral Participation Program. Judiciary, through its various verdicts, such as that of Union of India versus Association of Democratic Reforms 2002 case, contesting candidates need to disclose all their assets and liabilities. In Ramesh Dalal versus Union of India 2005 case also, legislature is disqualified from contesting elections. In People's Union of Civil Liberties versus Union of India 2013 case also, voters enjoy right to negative vote in the election process and directed the ECI to include the choice of nota in the ballot paper. Now we would like to suggest some needed reforms. Legislative reforms, state funding of elections, in which the state bears the election expenditure of political parties. It can bring transparency in the funding process, as public finance can limit the influence of interested donors' money and thereby help curb corruption. As we had discussed, simultaneous polls could be a very innovative measure to reduce the cost of holding elections. Central legislation in the Public Interest Foundation and others versus Union of India 2018 case, Supreme Court put the onus on the Parliament to frame a law to prevent criminalization of politics and take concerted efforts to cleanse the political system of the country. The time has come to frame suitable legislation on the lines of Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which puts a cap on fiscal deficit. The first past the post system, in which a person with the highest votes, even with one extra vote, is declared winner, needs to be changed. Rather, a minimum percentage of total votes poll can be fixed for declaring a candidate as the winner. This could restrict the criminals from getting elected, as not everybody in a constituency votes on party lines. At party level, limit on party expenditure has to be brought immediately. A time frame must be set for accounting the expenditure of parties and must be made public before the actual date of elections. Audit of political parties' accounts and also the rise in moral and self-discipline of political parties can bring a lot of changes to India as a democratic nation itself. And also, political parties need to be brought under the ambit of Right to Information Act 2005. And all parties should be given equal media space or airtime so as to provide a level playing field. At voters level, this is the most fundamental and significant aspect for nourishing the electoral democracy in India. Voters need to be educated regarding the significance of their vote. They should be made aware and well informed about the candidate they seek to vote, thereby rejecting those who try to entice them with freebies. There is a need of fixing governance system and effective regulation of political financing, along with bold reforms to break the vicious cycle of corruption and erosion of quality of democratic quality. It is crucial to plug the loopholes in the current laws to make the entire government machinery more accountable and transparent. Local bureaucracy can also bring a lot of changes here. It must be made accountable and held responsible so that their burden is not borne by the political parties. A voter forfeits the right to question the government when he or she compromises on moral values and accepts gift or cash for his or her vote. Therefore, citizens must vote in elections based on character, conduct, caliber, and capability of the candidates, and not based on cash, caste, community, and criminal prowess. So now I am entering into the conclusion part of my presentation. The constitutional functionaries who have taken the pledge to uphold the constitutional principles are charged with the responsibility to ensure that the existing political framework does not get tainted with the evil of corruption. The lack of prescription in the constitutional structure and scope laid down for the election commission could be criticized as being and leaving the institution open to party ill manipulation. Since its inception, with no significant institutional precedents and with the job of establishing a democracy based on universal franchise in a huge, diverse, illiterate electorate country with only limited experience of elections, it set up an effective electoral process which gave a solid grounding and enhanced the legitimacy of the democratic Indian government. Even though there are major loopholes that has to be plugged in, major controversies, issues, or many things that we have yet to be studied and resolved. Yet, the Indian democracy is ushering its growth on the basis of a solid backing given by the Election Commission and the various suggestions, reforms taken by the consecutive election commissioners who had chaired that post. So I would like to end my presentation by saying that in a democracy, it is a people-led government, or the people constitutes the sovereign element. So people must be empowered in order to run the missionaries more effective and more on. Thus, we can conserve our democracy. We can institutionalize such public institutions like Election Commission to a major level. Thank you so much for giving me such a nice opportunity to express my views on this most relevant topic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Amruta, for this very informative and energetic talk. Right from the Election Commission of India to the issues that are present in our electoral democracy, you very beautifully tried to cover each and every aspect, along with the needed reforms. It was a truly very remarkable presentation. And today, I have no doubt in saying that, from over the past 73 years, our election commission has gained a huge reputation across the world. And countries look up to us, learn from us, and to maintain to that reputation, I think we certainly need these strong measures to make our electoral democracy more transparent. So with this, let's move to some of the questions that were put up by our listeners. So the first question is from Ajay Gupta. He's saying that you have talked about electoral bonds. Anonymity is a major advantage of electoral bonds, and at the same time, transparency in depositing fund is another one. How do anonymity and transparency go hand in hand when they are antithesis?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last word of the question.
How do anonymity and transparency go hand in hand if they are antithesis of each other?
Sorry, extremely sorry. I couldn't.
Antithesis.
Antithesis. So it is a very crucial question that anonymity and transparency, these are major or crucial sides of one coin itself. So I would like to say that anonymity, when we are in the case of electoral bonds, what we can say is that there should be a limit on which the electoral donations by political parties could be done. Otherwise, we couldn't able to reduce or refuse the term of transparency for the sake of anonymity. Anonymity will create sometimes unbalanced benefits for certain sections of people, such as rich businessmen or industrialists. For example, we have seen that even though the political donations were suspended for some years, it was reintroduced by the people. So it is necessary to have electoral or political party donations in order to effectively run the government, but there should be a check. So anonymity and transparency, this is very difficult to check, but with the proper backing of legislative measures and transparent executive actions, we can bring both these ends together. That is my opinion.
Okay, Ms. Amrita. So another question is from Mr. Mudit. He is saying that the political funding through electoral bond is still highly opaque and controversial. What can be the alternative to this electoral bond funding? And don't you think that the recent Foreign Companies Regulating Act amendment of 2017 validated the black money transaction into the electoral process, and it needs to be instated? What do you views regarding this?
Yeah, I think that state funding of elections can be a major or effective alternative here, or this can be a very fruitful incentive in order to curb the unlimited influence of money power through these electoral donations. We don't know when anonymity is also at its peak. We don't know which business entities are favoring which political parties and for what goes. So I think state funding of elections can be a very good initiative or good measure that we can take in order to curb this menace to a certain extent.
Okay, Ms. Amrita. So another question is from Mr. Samba Kumar. He's saying that first past the post system helped us to bring out a true winner and seems easy. Why do you think another option will reduce criminal participation from getting elected?
Yeah. So I told that point because first past the post system, which means even a person who had scored simple majority can be the winner of the election. So at that times, the influence of freebies and such kind of manipulations is very prevalent at the grassroots level. In rural areas, it is very much prevalent because people often vote on the basis of familiarity or on the uniformity of their caste or religion, etc. So, in the sake of first past the post system, even one vote would change the fate or destiny of a candidate to be decided as a winner. So, first past the post system is providing the favorable ground for the people who are ready to influence the innocent people who are not very much aware or educated about the electoral procedures or something like that. There is a major kind of influence or major kind of persuasion which can be initiated through freebies, as I had discussed above, and also through other election propagandas which are exploiting their inner prejudices or something like that. So I think that first past the post system also makes a kind of, or also tweaks a kind of credibility of the election procedure.
Okay, Ms. Amrita. Now let's take a last question that is from Sonu. She's asking that don't you think education should be a part of eligibility criteria for someone to join the politics, just like bureaucrats are chosen on the basis of? If yes, is it even possible in India for at least next 10 years? And if no, then why not?
Yeah, that is a very prominent question because knowledge or education or knowledge generated wisdom is two different things. Even a very educated person who is a rank holder or something like that may not have the ability to know the inner feelings or grievances of people. So we cannot wholeheartedly bring education as the major defining criteria for electing our representatives. So there is a differentiation between education which is earned through degrees and doctoral certificates, etc. And the real ability of a political leader or the real ability of a leader lies in where he or she is able to understand the grievances of her fellow people and to lead them not as an authoritative leader or as an educated or well-performed leader, but as a companion who is always along with the public to share their opinions, to make their grievances out to the public. So I think that under the present scenarios in India, it is not very much possible to bring education as a criteria for this, because we cannot make it compulsory, but we can project education, which means basic minimum qualification, either literacy or the awareness or general awareness as a deciding factor for the candidates. That is my opinion, but education cannot be imprinted as a compulsory mandate for participating in our elections or to be get elected. That's my view. That is due to the practical impact, or due to the practical kind of circumstances existing in our country. We cannot raise over public opinions. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Amruta, for those beautiful answers. Now back to you, Mr. Shivam.
Yeah, thank you, Saurabh. It was really a commendable presentation by Ms. Amruta Ravishankar, and she beautifully answered all the questions. So thank you, Ms. Amruta Ravishankar, for having this presentation. Now, as you know, we have the traditions to facilitate our speaker with the Speaker of the Month award of a particular month. So the time came to announce the Speaker of the Month of July 2021. So first of all, I would like to introduce the speaker and the topic of the July month, which is Mr. Raj. The topic is 1857 in Delhi. Mr. Sanskar Sinhoria, India's foreign policy. Ms. Chandni Sikarwar, traditions of fair and festival in India. And Ms. Shivani Sharma, and the topic is medieval alchemy. So the award, Speaker of the Month award of the month July 2021 goes to Ms. Shivani Sharma for having the topic medieval alchemy of Gargi College, University of Delhi. So Ms. Shivani Sharma, if you are here, you can say something about your experiences. Over to you, Ms. Shivani Sharma.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I wasn't expecting this, and this was an splendid experience. And thank you for this platform and all the teachers and the all the student body of the GSTS. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shivani Sharma. Now I would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Anant Joshi, who is one of the editor of Journal of Continuity and Change, JCC, to introduce their topic, which is the idea of India, which the JCC team will going to present on our Independence Day, that is 15th of August 2021. So Mr. Anant Joshi, over to you.
Hello, good evening everyone present here. I, Anand Joshi, on behalf of the whole editorial team of Journal of Continuity and Change by Graduates, feels proud to present a beautiful topic, the idea of India, for the next Sunday on the 15th of August. In bonus, we are also publishing the second edition of Journal of Continuity and Change by Graduates of this month, having the theme Fear and Courage. Let's talk about India. India. This is a simple word in a dictionary or a triangle in the world map? If it is so, then why our chests become wider with pride when we hear Bharat, Hindustan, and India? Why do we feel so proud that we were born in this triangle area of the world map? This is because of the Indianness, Bharatiyata, which is not just a nationality, but an ideology full of eternity. Satyameva Jayate, truth alone triumphs. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, the whole world is one single family. Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, non-violence is the topmost dharma. Ano Bhadra Kritavo Yantu Vashvata, lest good thoughts come from everywhere. Sarva Panta Sambhav, all spiritual parts are treated equally. What are these? These are the ideologies of India. That's why we, the editors of Journal of Continuity and Change, that is Divya Tyagi, Archana Bharati, Deepa Tiwari, and me, Anand Joshi, will be presenting the topic, the idea of India, on the 75th anniversary of our independence as the whole nation celebrates Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. We will discuss about the soul of our constitution, that is the preamble of our Indian constitution, having features that India is a sovereign state, India is a socialist state, India is a secular state, India is a democratic state, and India is a republic. And we'll see how we have maintained the soul of our Indian constitution till today. We will also discuss the advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons of each feature as well. So, we the editors warmly welcomes you to the next Sunday on 15th of August for our talk and the publication of this month issue of JCC. Thank you for listening so patiently. See you all Sunday on the 15th of August. Jai Hind, Jai Bharati. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Anand Joshi, and we are eagerly waiting for your talk on 15th of August. So now I again welcome our dignified chief invitee, Dr. Praveen Kumar sir, to share his experiences regarding this talk. Sir, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Shubham. The presentation by Amrita, if I could see correctly, it was a very, you can say, well articulated and
Praveen, sir, a little bit
so
louder,
it was
sir.
a very well articulated and comprehensive presentation on such a, you can say, contemporary topic which covered almost all the aspects.